I have two people attending by Zoom, Savalia from Saskatoon and Susan from Ontario. So I was trying to run around and catch a little bit of the fashion show for them. Anyways, it's my pleasure to introduce Victor Malarek. He's known to most Canadians as a tough, hard-hitting, multiple award-winning investigative journalist who is willing to delve into the stories revealing the worst of human nature. Often described as a tough crusading reporter, Victor began his journalism career as a crime reporter at the Montreal Star, then to Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, CBC's Fifth Estate, and CTV's W5. For his outstanding public service journalism, Victor received quite prestigious awards, many multiple awards too. He has worked on over 325 investigative documentaries and has authored 6 nonfiction books, including The Natashas and The Johns. So this is the last copy we have of The Johns, and it's spoken for already by one of the models. And more recently, he has authored Orphanage 41 and now Wheat Shaft, a fast-paced, incisive political thriller. Here today, joining us from Toronto, we are so pleased to welcome Victor Malarek to share about his new book, his take on Ukraine and his connections with Nazi. Warm welcome.
I was asked to say a few words about Wheat Shaft. Many of the things that I do...
You're too far away.
Oh, I can speak loud too, you know. Many of the stories that I've written and that I've worked on for documentaries, I've taken some of it and put it into Orphanage 41 and into Wheat Shaft, and now I'm doing the takeout of the main character of Wheat Shaft called Matt Kozar, and he's going to really discover for the first time his real Ukrainian roots because of the war in
Oh, I can't hear anymore.
Okay, yeah, we lost connection for a minute, but you're back. Okay.
If not,
All right, can I get started? Just wanted to say, Lori, that I'm your male counterpart.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Well, it's pretty hard to because okay, there. And that is that, you know, I came from a broken home and lived in institutions in Quebec and was one of those fighters because my father made sure that my brothers and I fought, and we fought against the system, we fought against the abuse, we fought against everything. And when from happenstance, I became a journalist by walking into a door to be an office boy, and then boom. And I always wrote about what was going on in the child welfare system, the foster home systems, all of the abuses that kids were going through. And then I switched it over to the abuses of the elderly. Then I switched it over to the battering of women because my mother had been battered. And I've always fought and will always continue fighting with my last breath on all of the kind of documentaries and stories that I've worked on. And right now, where my thoughts are and where my prayers are and where my drive is and where my spirit is and where my soul is Ukraine. And what's happening there to the women, to the children, to the elderly, to the people fighting for freedom. So when Ukraine enters our thoughts, there's so much to be sad about, there's so much to be angry about, and there's so much to cry about. And we've all seen, read, and heard the horrific accounts of the brutal genocide being committed every single day by Putin's henchmen and assassins since the Russian army invaded Ukraine on February 24th. Now, in 12 days, it's going to be 1 year. Make no mistake about it, Putin wants to wipe Ukraine off the map. He wants to destroy its language, its culture, and its people. The torture and the murders, the execution of people, just regular people in villages and towns, at the hands of Russian soldiers is a deliberate and planned genocide. And because of this, Putin should be branded an international war criminal and a terrorist. And hopefully one day soon, Putin and his murderous henchmen will pay for their heinous crimes and terrorist acts that they have committed and are committing in Ukraine. The toll of human suffering Putin has heaped on Ukraine is unbelievably horrific. And to date, according to, and I'm going to give you a list of statistics that's going to shock you. The latest Ukrainian government statistics, more than 13,000 Ukrainian soldiers, men and women, have been killed fighting for a free Ukraine, defending their homeland. More than 100,000 soldiers, men and women, have been wounded. By the way, 137,000 Russian soldiers who have come to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians have been killed to date. 137,000 young men wasting their lives for a piece of garbage called Putin. More than 9,000 civilians, children, women, the elderly, have been killed by bombings of their villages and towns and cities. Almost 12,000 have been wounded in the indiscriminate bombings and shelling of villages and towns. And more than 8 million Ukrainians, mostly women and children, have fled Ukraine, while 8 million have been displaced within the country. And today, 17.6 million Ukrainians are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. They are suffering an unimaginable humanitarian crisis with no end in sight. And for me and for every one of us here, all of this is happening tears at your soul. But for all Ukrainians, life in wartime is a constant reality, with children experiencing the worst hardship. My heart always goes out to children. Every Ukrainian child suffers the intended consequences of Putin's diabolical plan. And according to UNICEF's representative in Kyiv, all 7 million of Ukraine's children have been affected by the war. Every day they suffer unimaginable pain and suffering. Most have lost parents, their brothers and sisters, their schools and neighborhood friends. Many have lost fathers and mothers killed on the front lines defending Ukraine. And every day children run for cover when the terrifying air raid systems and sirens go off, only to emerge from the safety of a bomb shelter to find their homes, schools, playgrounds, daycare centers, and hospitals bombed into rubble. According to Ukraine's Prosecutor General, 460 children to date have been killed in Ukraine since the Russian invasion began. Almost 1,000 have been seriously wounded, a lot of them losing legs and arms. We brought a couple of them back into Montreal to be at the Shriners Hospital to be fitted with prosthetics. And it's horrible to see little kids with their legs missing and their arms missing. For what? What did the kid do? 360 have just disappeared. They've probably been vaporized in the bombing. Nobody knows where they are because they don't exist in a body or anything. And according to the Ukrainian government, 14,000 children to date have been abducted by Russian invaders and deported to Russia. Abducted and deported. 14,000. Children ripped from the arms of their parents or stolen from orphanages and forcibly adopted by Russian families in the far-flung regions of the eastern part of Russia, Siberia. Think about this for a moment. Ukrainian children being raised by Russians who are listening every day to the propaganda on television of how vile the Ukrainians are, that they're Nazis, that they hate Jews, that they're anti-Semitic, which is absolutely what's happening in Russia, not in Ukraine. The president of Ukraine is Jewish. But this is what's happening. Go there and they are adopting Ukrainian children to Russify them, to wipe out anything Ukrainian in their system, in their bodies, in their souls, in their spirits. Because there is a loathing so deeply ingrained in the sick psyche of the constant assault and deprived racist propaganda being spewed by the Russian media. The Russian media is the equivalent, I guess, of Fox News in the United States. It's horrible what happens on those stations. Putin and his murderous war machine is robbing Ukraine's children of their childhood. All of the Ukraine's children today of their childhood, when all they hear is missiles, bombs, bullets, and death and destruction every single day. So with all this gut-wrenching news coming from Ukraine every single day, it seems almost impossible to find inspiration. And I always look for inspiration. All my life I've looked for inspiration whether I'm talking to the guys who are in the home with me, in the boys' homes, in the detention centers, in the foster care systems. I look for inspiration. When I do a documentary, I look for some kind of silver lining so that people can feel I can do something about this. So, positive, uplifting events that are truly inspirational. And most of all, the Ukrainian people in their heroic defense of their homeland from Putin's genocidal war. We should all be inspired by the men and women who have gone to the front lines to defend Ukraine from this barbarous invasion. The fighting spirit of Ukrainian soldiers facing against an onslaught of contemptible Russian assassins. Ukrainian soldiers are fighting to their death because they believe in a free Ukraine and an independent Ukraine. And with each death, the spirit of Ukraine lives on, and it gets stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, Russian soldiers, the despicable sleazes that they are, loot the homes and villages that they've invaded, taking above all things toilets. You see them marching down the streets, taking the toilets out of these houses after they've killed the families that lived in them. There's the inspiration that we can take from Vladimir Zelensky, the brave leader of Ukraine. When Putin's killers invaded Ukraine, Zelensky did not pack his bags and run. He chose to stay and fight, and he chose to stand for Ukraine. Yet while the president of Ukraine risks his life to visit his battle-weary troops on the front lines, that war criminal, Putin, hides in his bunker telling his toadies that he sees himself now as the embodiment of the 17th century Tsar, Peter the Great. That's sick. It's a psychotic. Anyway, there's nothing great about Putin. He is a murderous psychopath. He has dragged Russia into a massive, muddy sinkhole. And he has humiliated his nation. Internationally, his nation is mud. There's inspiration we can take from the free nations of the world that have condemned the Russian war against Ukraine. Nations that stand firmly behind Ukraine's right to exist to a free, peaceful, and democratic nation. We can take inspiration in the global delivery of military aid from numerous nations now, giving Ukraine soldiers a fighting chance to beat the Russian invaders and send them home in a box. But more has to be done on the military front for Ukraine to force the invaders to retreat. Ukraine needs more weapons, more lethal weapons, and they need them now, or they will be defeated. At the last meeting of the G7, it issued a communique stating, "We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, providing the needed financial, humanitarian, military, and diplomatic support in its courageous defense of its sovereignty and territorial integrity." And there is the incredible outpouring of humanitarian aid, another inspiration. The humanitarian situation is in dire needs, and the needs are immense. Poland, Moldova, Romania have opened their hearts, their homes, and their borders to millions of Ukrainians, mostly women and children, running away from the bombing. And we're incredibly grateful to those nations. I'm on Facebook, and on Facebook a friend wrote, "If Ukraine wins the war," and I stopped it right there. Immediately I said, look, it's not when. It's not if, it's when it wins the war. Don't use if. If is never been in my vocabulary. I fight not to lose, or if I might win, I fight to win. And if is in the hearts, is not in the hearts of the Ukrainians who are fighting on the front lines. Ukraine cannot lose this war because it will spell the end of Ukraine. Putin will order his henchmen to round up anyone and everyone who has fought against his view of the world, and they will be taken to re-education camps, and they'll be exiled to Romania, to Siberia. Intellectuals and journalists will probably be rounded up and summarily executed, and soldiers will be rounded up and executed. And I can't stress this enough. Putin's goal is clear. He wants to wipe Ukraine off the world map. He wants to destroy its language and its culture. And he has carved a deliberate and diabolical plan of mass extermination. What he is executing is a modern-day genocide. and Putin must not succeed. Ukraine has to win this war, and it will. I want to return to this main theme of my talk, inspiration, and the overwhelming worldwide outpouring of humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine. For 2023, the G7 has pledged and given $32 billion in economic support to Ukraine. And talk about inspiration on April 9th, 2022, a star-studded worldwide digital event called Stand Up for Ukraine raised $11 billion for US to help those fleeing the Russian invasion. And to date, the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, in partnership with the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress, has raised more than $50 million in donations. 25 million of that has already been deployed through CUF's Humanitarian Relief Committee to projects aimed towards helping the people in Ukraine. In my 47 years as a journalist, I have reported on devastating crises around the world, around the globe. Wars, famines, the trafficking of millions of women and children into the global sex trade. And so often I've met people and continue to meet people who say to me, one crisis or another is just so overwhelming. Way overwhelming, it's too huge. I'm only one person, what can I do? And my reply has always been, if you can help one person in dire need, touch the soul and lift the spirit of that one man, woman, or child trapped in a desperate situation, then you've done something good. And I take the inspiration from the Canadian medical teams that have gone to Ukraine and are now in Poland working on wounded soldiers. I did a documentary on them for W5, of which I'm very proud, of the doctors, the Canadian doctors who've gone over there and are operating on these wounded people. And they do it from their heart. They are touching the souls. Every time they put a guy's face back together again, or his limbs or whatever, and the family came in, they would cry and hold the doctors and nurses, and the soldiers would cry, and the doctors and nurses would cry, because they touched the soul and spirit of these people. They did good. So for me, what they're doing is nothing short of amazing. And I take inspiration, for example, from the small band of men and women who began in a little place called Saskatoon, Nashi. And more than a decade ago, the volunteers of Nashi decided to do their little bit and rescue vulnerable girls from the streets of Ukraine. They built a safe house, which they call the Maple Leaf House, in a small farm village called Stoyenyuv outside of Lviv. They built it one pierogi at a time. My daughter did the initial documentary called One Pierogi at a Time, and I did the follow-up to it. And that's how they raise money. Pinching pierogis, making pierogis, and having a pierogi fest. And people come from all over the place. They just sold out their tickets for March in 2 weeks in January. Just gone like that. Building a house, a safe house for these girls, one pierogi at a time. Nashi's volunteers and generous donors have created a wonderful and loving haven for up to 20 girls who otherwise would have been destroyed by the dire consequences they had been trapped in. And the girls rescued by Nashi have been given a chance at a happy and safe life. And when the Russians invaded Ukraine and launched their scorched earth policy of annihilation, I immediately called Savelia and I said, look, get them out of there. Get them out of there now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for next week, because when the Russians hit these villages, they rape girls. They rape women. And you have to make sure you get them out. And we did. We got them into Poland. They're in a safe place in Poland, being taken care of by loving people in Poland. But they do want to go home, because the Maple Leaf House is their home. And the Canadians from Saskatoon, from Edmonton, from Regina, from all over Canada are their family. And we will stay with them as long as there are girls. Now, we all have a choice and a voice, and we need to use it. We need to speak out and protest against the murderous psychopath Putin, and he cannot be allowed to invade Ukraine and take it over. And in speaking out, I've been challenging Prime Minister Trudeau and his government over why he has yet to boot one Russian diplomat out of this country. What are they doing here? They don't do anything good here. They lie, they do espionage, they do nasty things, and they're still here, still in this country. More than 20 countries around the world have expelled more than 350 Russian diplomats, and like I said, basically thugs and thieves and spies from their embassies and consulates. These embassies and consulates, and I know this from experience, are basically hubs for spying. And yet Canada has yet to expel one diplomat. On April 5th, Trudeau said, April 5th, way back, he was considering expelling Russian diplomats over atrocities being committed in Ukraine by Putin's assassins. Do you know how many atrocities have been committed since April 5th? I don't know what he's waiting for, but I keep challenging him, and a lot of other people challenge him, but I don't know, he dithers. I guess he's something wrong there. Since then, Putin has continued his genocide against Ukraine with a vengeance, and again, as I said, Trudeau continues to dither. Putin has put out a list of Canadian cabinet ministers and MPs and provincial premiers and MPPs, city mayors and leaders in the Ukrainian Canadian community, barring them from entering Russia. Like we really want to spend our vacation in Moscow or St. Petersburg, watching people with big Z's on their cars talking about, hey, we're doing a great job killing Ukrainians. We don't want to be there, and nobody should want to go and take a vacation there. So, my message to Trudeau is, what are you waiting for? The expulsion of Putin's diplomats should have been ordered the very first day that they invaded Ukraine and started a war against Ukraine. With Russia's scorched earth policy, its constant bombardment of cities, towns, and villages across Ukraine, the indiscriminate killing and summary executions of hundreds of innocent men and women, and we continue to dither. Russia has become the most vile terrorist organization on the planet. The crimes against humanity that Russia is committing daily in Ukraine fits the very description of a nation that is a sponsor of state terrorism. And while many democratic nations around the world have declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, again, guess who dithers? Who can't seem to see what this country, this nation called Russia and Putin are doing in Ukraine. They are a state sponsor of terrorism. They are terrorists, and Putin is the lead terrorist. All of us here today must not sit back and remain silent. I never remain silent about anything. If I see something going on, I do something about it. I have a voice, and I'm strong enough to deal with things. But I've always believed that you have to speak out, because no one spoke out when I was in an institution with my brothers and what was happening there. No one spoke out. But when I got the voice, I said I'm going to speak out and not stop speaking out. And every humanitarian issue I deal with is the same. I go out and I speak. Maybe nothing will happen, maybe something will, but people have to speak, because when you are silent, you are in commitment with what is going on, complicit with what is going on. Silence gives the bully a sense of power to do whatever he wants, and I've never liked a bully. My father brought us up after he came back from the war, never to ever back down from a bully, because bullies are all cowards, and a piece of garbage in Russia called Putin is a coward. He's an immoral thug, and he's a murderous psychopath. He's openly committing a genocide aimed at destroying anything and everything that is Ukrainian. And any country, any corporation, any individual doing business with Russia means one thing. They are giving money to a terrorist state, and therefore they are complicit in a modern-day genocide. Putin is a war criminal, and one day I hope he is brought in chains to the International Court in The Hague and put on trial and prosecuted for crimes against humanity and genocide. And when the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, many pundits were going around and labeling Putin a master tactician. He's a master idiot, because he's learned one thing about Ukrainians. They don't give up. They will fight because they believe in their culture, they believe in their language, the spirit of Ukraine lives in their soul, and they will continue fighting even if it means to their death. And And that was what he did not think, that he had not thought through. For this former KGB sloth who has been shown to be a tactical moron who totally misread the power of the Ukrainian spirit. It is in the DNA of Ukrainians not to give in to bullies. It is in their DNA to fight for what they believe in, and they will fight to the death for their country, for their culture, and for their freedom, for their children. For those Ukrainian Canadians born here like myself, no matter if you are a first, second, third, or fourth generation, the blood of Ukraine still runs through our veins. That's going to come out, by the way, in my subsequent book that I'm working on now called Putin's Assassins. Matt Kozar, the lead character, is going to find the DNA of Ukraine just bursting through his veins in this book. It's in my DNA and it's in our DNA and it's part of who we are. And it's something to cherish, something to be proud of, and something to fight for. And what we're doing here today is important because it sends a message to Ukraine that we care, that we stand for Ukraine. And again, I can't emphasize this one important fact, a fact that Ukrainians clearly understand. Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine with one objective, to kill Ukrainians. And if Ukrainians don't fight, they won't exist. It is the right of every Ukrainian to fight for their homeland, and it is the obligation of every hyphenated Ukrainian in the diaspora to support them. We must do everything in our power to ensure Ukraine wins this war, and win this war they will. And that's why I always say Slava Ukraini. Because, yeah, never stand back on any issue that you believe in. Never stand back. And when I was listening to Gloria, I thought, wow, exactly the same as me. When I grew up, stuff was bad, and I always looked at things saying, it's way too big, it's way too big, it's way too big. It's not too big. Do your little bit, and this little bit, and this little bit becomes a big bit, and then becomes a whole blinking movement. And that's how you stop stuff that's really bad in the world. That's how you stop people, because you stand up to them and they know that people are there to take them on. And take them on, I will. And take them on, I do. And take them on, Gloria does. Because that's what we're here for. There's a lot of people who need help. And we can give it. And I give it. And every one of us here should give it. Because now when I look at the girls of Nashi, I feel real happy when I see them. Every time I see them on Facebook, they keep growing because we haven't been there for a while. But man, it's so nice. It touches your soul. It touches your spirit because we've touched their soul and we've touched their spirit and we've helped them grow into nice young women who have not been targeted by hope. You know, they would have been targeted by Russian soldiers, but they're good. But when you look at situations that are so huge, we can't give up. We just got to keep fighting. And again, you touch one person's soul, you've done something in your life. Thanks for inviting me, and if anyone has questions, feel free to ask, and whether it's about the book, yeah, Gloria.
You know, thank you so much for sharing today and just always standing up. You have the same justice button that I do, that when someone presses it, you're like, watch out. You know, is that you're just going to go in. My question, dear, is, you know, in Canada, I mean, I love this country, but we are very complacent. When it comes, like, if you look at the average sentence in Canada for the rape of a child, maybe 6 months if they get convicted. In the US, it's 10 years, right? So as a country, we are complacent, and we've had, you know, especially with Trudeau, you don't get more complacent. Like, he makes a statement a year ago, and he's still like, what the hell is he waiting for, right? So my question for you is that, is it kind of similar to what we deal with, like on the child sexual abuse, that it's so bad and dirty that people are like, oh, I don't want to get involved with that? Like, what do you think is driving kind of that apathy towards this situation that, you know, everybody, the countries are involved and they're sending them stuff, but we're not really involved the way that we should be, right? Why do you think that is? Is it apathy? Is it fear? You know, why aren't people, you know, in the streets say, like, this is happening every day and people are just blocking it out, you know what, it doesn't affect me and all of this stuff. Like, what is that? Like, where is that coming from?
You know, when you look at social media today, so much is coming at everybody all the time, whether it's on television, whether it's on your computers, you're being hit. It's almost like a tidal wave or an avalanche every day, every day, every day. And people have come up to me and said, what do I choose as my issue? Is it climate change? Is it the economy? Is it poverty? Is it homelessness? Is it, you know, the battering of women? What is it? There's just too much. And I've always said, you gotta pick a fight and go after that fight. You can't change the world. I can't change the world. I've done a lot of documentaries, and maybe I've changed a little bit over here and a little bit over there, but I can't change the world. But it's like I always say, if you do your thing, you pick a fight, and you fight that fight. I probably am fighting about a dozen fights right now, but I like taking about a dozen people at a time. But a lot of people can't seem to grasp that huge tidal wave that comes at them. And that's why I always say to them, don't look at that. Look at people. Find that person, find that little group, find that little organization that you can be a part of. Like when Nashi got together and they heard me the first time I spoke in Edmonton. And they said, what can we do? I said, well, just don't throw money at it. Make something. And they built the safe house. And they're dealing with the girls. And it's so phenomenal. And you see the girls grow and have become really a family of girls together. You know, they're all sisters. So I don't know if it's so much apathy as I can't take it anymore. I can't take, you know, you watch the daily news and it just makes you sick. You know, for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the invasion of Ukraine, I was sick. I was depressed. I didn't know what to do. You know, and I'm thinking, geez, why did this guy do this? What did these people do to be bombed like this and to be killed and murdered and raped and everything and executed for what? What did they do? And it really tortured my soul. But then I had to pick myself up and say, okay, now I'm going to go out and, you know, speak about it, you know, go after politicians and make sure they hear that we have to stand. Canada has to stand. The United States is standing firm. The EU is standing firm, except for Hungary, you know, and defending Ukraine. But there's way too much out there. There's way too much for one individual, and that's why I always say, pick a fight and do good in that fight, and then you'll feel good. But you can't take on the world. It's way too big. Yes.
My name is Josephine Ballard, and I work for Changing Together, the Center for Immigrant Women. My question is, we have quite a few Ukrainian academics, professionals. I am presently teaching a doctor that just came from Ukraine, or not came, but brought into Edmonton in order to be able to really bring her family here. Now the question is, she is a doctor in Ukraine, but she will never be a doctor here because her level of English is so low that she cannot even pass the test of the regulatory authority. How will we help them in order to be able to move forward and really say, this is what we're doing right now in Edmonton with our Ukrainians that are here?
We have to understand that, I used to work on immigration issues. I wrote a book once called Canada's Immigration Fiasco, Havens Gate. And one of the things I did look at is professionals coming here, particularly doctors, and they are ending up driving taxi cabs and flipping burgers. Because in a number of countries, they cannot reach the level of the kind of medical training that we give here or in the United States or Great Britain or wherever, in France. Their level is much, much lower. And they have to go into a hospital and do another intern. And to get that internship is really, really difficult, whether it's Ukrainian or anyone else from any other country that Canada does not accept as medical credentials. That's a sad reality. The other sad reality is that we could use those people in far-flung regions of Canada where they don't even have one doctor. And these people are as good as, you know, an EMT, an emergency doctor, you know, an emergency person in triage or whatever. They can be very helpful. And also, to, you know, I mean, we do good ESL training and all that to various people well, to all people who come here if they want to learn English or French. So sadly, there's a lot of people with credentials that are not accepted in Canada. And until they meet that level, you know, I mean, one guy that called me, he was Iranian, and he said, you know, I'm a pharmacist and I have to work in Walmart. And I said, well, did you take the test? And he said, yeah. Well, he didn't even pass the first year test. So I said, well, what do you want to do? I mean, the level of training in your country is not the level here. So there's nothing much you can do about it unless you go back to school and at least you've got a good start and then try to improve yourself. But that's a reality now, you know. I'd rather have my doctor looking at me from a Canadian medical point of view than, you know, something from some strange place. Yeah.
Just to follow up, so, because I'm just always so curious, is that, yes, there's, you know, tons of messages and it's negative, and you've got your word warriors on there, and they're just fighting all the time, and just being negative, and it's a cesspool, right? So, one of the things that I've discovered is a lot of people will say, they're like, yeah, but you're you. And I'm like, but I feel that, like, when I speak and I travel, that people don't realize their own power as a human. That they're like, well, it's too much, what could little me do? And same as you, I say to them, listen, like, I grew up in a trailer park, like, this is my whole life. I just took that first step, I took that fight. Is that, do you, when you're traveling and chatting with people, like, because I see it, that people are, if everybody did a little bit, we probably wouldn't have any problems, to be very candid. And whether that's money or support or whatever it is do you see that people don't know their own potential? That if broken kids like you and I can do the things that we've done, like everybody could do that, right?
You know, I went to a couple of reunions for the guys from the homes, you know, and a lot of the vast majority of them are emotional cripples. They can't get over what happened in their childhood. On top of that, you also have people that are just generally living their lives. They're trying to make ends meet. You have to understand that. You know, like I don't expect people to, you know, suddenly say, well, they don't have any energy just to get up in the morning. But there are people who can inspire people to say, you know what, you want to feel good about yourself, join this organization over here, and you're going to find what a treat it is, you know, to help somebody. But I don't judge anybody because they can't seem to get out of bed, or the guys who are in the home, or the girls who are in the girls' homes, that never ever manage to get the inner strength. They are continually, 50, 60 years later, to still be victims. And they will always be victims. There's a class action suit right now in Quebec on the child welfare system. Well, the child care and child welfare system, I always find that a bit of an oxymoron. But, you know, they think that somehow, if a monetary decision is made, that will help. It won't. The other thing that I really take offense to this is, I don't believe in the bullshit of these apologies by the government on anything. Period. Ever. And there's one reason for this. Much of what has happened in the 50s and 60s and 40s and 70s happened then. And those people weren't there. They weren't part of it. They didn't cause it. So to listen to Trudeau say, I am so sorry, doesn't ring with me, and doesn't ring with anybody in Quebec or that I grew up with as true. And to hear an apology from someone who didn't do anything doesn't mean it. Well, I'm saying I'm apologizing on behalf of the government, of the church, or whatever. You weren't there. This current pope wasn't there. So listening to him apologize doesn't work for me. I just listen and I go, you're full of beans. You're full of beans, and you know, it's a political statement or some other thing. I want to hear action aimed at trying to do something for the victims and to try to better their lives and to try to make some kind of healing process for them. I don't want to hear another stupid apology. And I don't want to hear them say, we're going to give money, and then you never hear anything for years.
Well, it's interesting too, because if you look at the visit from the Pope, 75 million is the number that we were given. It was probably more than that we paid for. But, you know, easily they could have got in touch with Little Warriors and said, you know what, we're the only one in the world, we're right here, and we are going to fund residential school survivors and their kids forever. Got it? Heal them. But they didn't offer, Hope offered nothing. Nothing. Right? Like, I have to tell you, it was visceral, like, for me. Like, watching that and, you know, Trudeau getting on his knees and shaking his hands, and I'm like, but they didn't even say sexual abuse in the statement. They said abuse by all churches. I read it line by line by line, and I was outraged. Like, if you're gonna come here, we're gonna send 75 million, apologize and make it authentic. Even if you weren't there, do something. You've got a center. My gosh, it's free for the kids to come. Oh, they could have came and said, we're gonna donate $10 million for Little Warriors for all these residential schools. We could have healed those people. But they didn't make any effort to heal those people. It's not money that's gonna heal. I'm Indigenous. It's not money that is gonna heal.
Yep.
Got it? It's support so we can break the cycle.
Yep.
But that whole visit was a show. It was like the Queen came to town. You know what I mean? Like, it was, and some people were like, oh, you know, I feel good. And I was like, I feel disgusted. Like, I'm sorry I do. You know, they reached out to us to be part of like some of the counseling and stuff, and we were just like, no, like, we're not touching it. Like, so they knew us enough to make that connection, but not to help us help the people that they violated. That's true, a true apology is making amends and having action. Not just, what's been done since he left? Nothing. Nothing's been done. Don't spend $75 million. You know what I could do with $75 million? Do you know what I could do? 75 million. Like 75 million, and we catered and adored and all of these things. An organization, this is the richest organization in the world. They're loaded. Right?
Well, you know, Trudeau's out there looking for a selfie moment.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed
Honestly,
with
that stuff
what has happened on so many levels.
It's insulting. It really, like, as a survivor, it's insulting. Right? Do something about it, make amends, right? And all it is money, but they weren't allowed because that would be showing something else. You know what I mean? But you know, I love these apologies that are made because I think they're all bullshit too. Like, there's no sincerity, there's no authenticity with it. He does not care, right? And the problem that we have with politics now is that the people that run are not people in this room. They're not people like you, they're not people like me, they're not people like us. They're in there, it's ego, it's often the most money that they've ever made. And they're toeing the line for whoever's in charge, not for us. It's not a government that is of the people anymore, right? So I agree with you on the apologies, it's just gross.
Well, you know, there have been international conferences by the United Nations on child poverty, on the abuse of women, on all kinds of issues. And they said in 10 years' time, hunger will be a thing of the past.
Yes.
I can go back all the way through to the 1980s, and they say 10 years' time, and 10 years' time, and 10 years' time, and all of these countries sign on. And in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years, nothing has happened. It's even worse. But all they do is they go to these big conferences, they pay a lot of money to go to these conferences, where they get a lot of money to go to the conferences, but nothing really happens. And that's why I always say the United Nations is UN, unable to deal with any crisis in the
Yes.
world. I don't support them, never will. Never support the United Nations, and I will never support them when they put Russia on the Security Council. Are you kidding me?
Oh God.
Well, the same as the Iranians put him on for the women's rights thing.
You know, I was in Iran during the hostage taking
Oh.
with Global Mail. And one of the things that happened when Ayatollah Khomeini came into power was they put mullahs on motor scooters and they went stabbing women who were wearing the chadors. And I was like shocked, you know, because it was a very progressive society until the theologians took over. And it is a horrible place now.
I think the thing is, one thing that we don't do as a society is prevention, and I think that's one of the worst things. It's always after the fact, and we, you know, you say to the organizations, what are you doing to prevent this? Oh, we're just doing something on the other end. I said, what are you doing before so that, you know, it's a problem so we solve it when it's little? instead of waiting till it's a huge monstrous thing.
You know, I just want to say, what we're hearing right now is like a, you know, back to the tidal wave or the avalanche. You got to just pick a fight and make something good of your life in terms of picking a place to go to. And you know, the great thing about working with the organizations and helping people is you make great friends. You know, and you meet great people, and people who are like-minded and want to do something, want to make a change. And it's good to be around positive people because change is positive. You know, and if there's ever a message to people saying, I don't know what to do. So I have friends who are involved in so many different projects, whether it's environmental, you know, climate change, or even with animal rights and human rights, and you know, whether it's with battered women's shelters or drug addicted people or whatever, they're doing something. And at least when they, again, you'll never solve all the problems of the world. You may not even solve the problems of some of the people that you're dealing with, because they're so damaged they'll never ever be able to get themselves lifted out of the hole that they're in. But at least you tried. And that's the very least you can ask of anyone, to try.
2 questions from Susan. She wants your advice on the best organizations to donate to for Ukraine right now. And then she's also asking, will someone get your book into Russia the way that someone got material into Czechoslovakia for Pavel before the revolution?
My book?
Could you repeat it to the mic, please, so
Sure.
that we can hear it
Okay.
here?
I'm gonna just try to read that here. Okay, Susan is in Ontario, and her questions are, what does Victor think are the best organizations to donate to for Ukraine right now? And then she's also asking, will someone get your book into Russia the way that someone got material into Czechoslovakia for Pavel before the revolution?
The Natasha's book was translated into Russian, and it is in Russian. And so it went into Russia, I think, in about 2005, and into Ukraine around the same time, translated into Ukraine. It was translated into about 13 languages, 14 languages, and around the world. It did really well. So they've got that. The other books, no, I don't know. But who to give to? The Canada-Ukraine Foundation is doing amazing work. And I've, all of the proceeds of my book, the WeChat, I purchased the book and I gave them everything, including the money that I purchased the book from, to Canada-Ukraine Foundation and to Nashi. Nashi does its little bit. Canada-Ukraine Foundation does a big, big, big swath. And there's to help us help the children. But you have to be very careful about all of the things that are on the social media sites saying, give to this and give to that and give to this. Check in and find out. If they've got a charitable license, you can always go and look at what that charity is doing. I've taken down many charities, by the way, phony charities, many of them. As a journalist, I can catch them very quickly. But there are a lot of good people out there doing great things to help what is happening in Ukraine, and they continue. UNICEF, part of UN. I've seen their offices, I've seen the salaries they make. I don't give anything to UNICEF. I stay away from them because I've not seen any concrete help. And there's a whole bunch of organizations like that that I'm very careful of because of what I've seen in the past and what I've, dug up over the years. But again, you have the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress, the World Congress.
Congress of Ukraine, yeah.
But anyway, in Canada, you've got two or three really good ones, the little ones, and with Help Us Help.
Are there any more questions? Oh, yeah.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment from all of you, and especially the two of you, is I think we have to be careful not to get it, I think we have to understand the negative things that are happening, but I also think we need to, each individual, and I think you alluded to this, and each one of us, let's talk Trudeau, right, have a voice. Each one of us, absolutely make that voice, even if you, when you're talking to your MLA or MP, let them know what you want, right? Like even if you don't have the money, even if you don't have the time, let them know what you want, number one. And I think the next thing is, for people like yourselves, is to let people know what they can do. It isn't just about money, because I agree with you. I believe in social enterprise, and I think that in order to keep things going, if you just hand it money, it just evaporates, right? Because it gets spent. So let the people know what they can do, what they, because it is overwhelming. But if you take one piece of that, whether it's talking to your MLA or MP, whether it is, if you have the money, give them money. If you have the time, do the time. When you are at cocktail parties, talk to your friends about what's going on. I think we need to, you had said, why don't we do this? I think we need to focus on what is it that we can do. We know this is happening, and it's good to hear, but I also want to know what piece that each person can take.
Yeah.
I think that, like for us on our website, it's like, how can you help? Can you come remove brush? Like we have a whole list of jobs, because we pay money to get things done in the facility, then we don't have the money for the kids. So there's like, you can come and remove brush, you can work an event, you can hold an event, you can give money, you can do a third-party fundraiser, you can,
You have birthday parties, donate to the little boys, or do your parade, right?
Yeah, so it's on our website, we've got it, and we
But
even
it has
have
to come off your website also, because I was at your event, the big event. I didn't hear that, and I was going to put up my hand and say, "Could you tell me what I need to do?" It's really important, because you got to bring it down to the level of the people. So that's my, and I do appreciate it.
well said.
You had a question, Raymond?
Not so much a question as a statement. Earlier you mentioned something about Putin trying to compare himself to another previous Russian ruler, Peter the Great. One suggestion I have, you might want to compare Putin to a Russian ruler whose characteristics he shares and whose behavior he shares and never goes to the front lines, and that's Joseph Stalin.
Yeah. Yeah. Who wasn't Russian? As she said, when you go to a cocktail party, start talking first, because by the time the hours go by, I'm usually very happy.
We all.
Yeah.
John?
And incoherent.
My question is more about looking into the crystal ball and wondering how these war criminals are going to be brought to justice in the international courts, and what efforts are being made to document these crimes officially and moving forward to make these people accountable for their acts.
Putin's war crimes are now being documented, and the war crimes of individual soldiers and officers that they've done in Bucha and other different parts of Ukraine have and are being documented. The rapes, the murders, the summary executions, and the names and photographs attached to those people are now being documented, so that when the war is over and Ukraine is free, they can be brought in chains to the World Court in The Hague and face the music. I don't think that Putin will ever go to the World Court. I think he's going to take the Hitler way out.
Any more questions? And I don't see, yeah, I think we're good here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sedalia, I was wondering if you wanted to just give a quick update on NASHI. I'll see if I can get you to the microphone here.